Adrienne Dorison here with another episode of Sorta Bossy. And today's episode is for you if you've ever thought, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing. I think as leaders, we've all had that moment where we realize we're not actually sure what we should be doing in the day-to-day as a leader when it comes to our people, or really what our role is meant to be at all. Right? And most of us have never actually been taught specifically how to be a leader. Like maybe we've gotten some book recommendations from our higher ups or went through a little HR training or even read a TED Talk or watched a TED Talk, and maybe that was helpful, but it didn't actually sit us down and help us understand the nuts and bolts of like, okay, here's how you delegate effectively to someone so that it doesn't end up back on your plate. And here's how to hold someone accountable, and here's how to implement feedback loops, and here's how to communicate with someone effectively when they're underperforming. Like none of those things are usually taught to us as leaders. And most of the time we are really good doers, whether that's because we founded a company and we were like the ones doing everything at first, and then we could no longer do everything at a certain point. And so then we hire someone and now all of a sudden we're an accidental manager, we're a leader. Or because you're within an organization and you are a really good doer. And so they say, oh my gosh, you're an incredible doer. You're a high performer. Like we should make you a leader. And then they promote you. But now you're like not doing your job anymore. You're supposed to be doing this new job of leading other people on how they should do their job. And that's entirely different. But most of the time you're not trained on how to do that part, right? The important part. So I've actually been in both of those positions where I've started a company, did everything, and then slowly started to build team members. And then all of a sudden I was managing other people and I'm a leader. I've also been in the corporate world and had jobs of various, levels and degrees where I was really good at the doing. And so then I got promoted and then I had to manage other people. And no one's really good at clarifying like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now? And is anybody going to teach me how to do that? Or am I just expected to know it? And the truth is, in the old antiquated model that most corporations and companies run off of, you're just supposed to know how to do it, I guess. And as business owners, like if you're not seeking that out, then who is going to teach you, right? And so today I want to talk about like how that old model really exists and why it doesn't work for us anymore, and how you can start shifting into the new model for modern leadership, right? So we talked about this a little bit on the last trailer episode, but I think this is a really important statistic that I'm going to keep coming back to. And so I'm going to say it again. 2 really important numbers. Number 1, only 15% of leaders ever receive any formal training. And so 85% of leaders that are out there are literally just winging it. They're just learning like trial and error, right? Trial by fire, and fake it till you make it, and learn and mess things up, and then hope that the mess isn't too big, and hope you keep your job, right? Hope things work out for you. And so 85% of people just really winging it out there for a role that is essentially the most important role within the organization because it helps to lift and empower and pull everybody else up. And the other statistic that I talked about on the last episode, and I'm going to talk about ad nauseum because it's really important to me, is this idea that 69% of employees reported that their manager, their leader, had a bigger impact on their mental health than their doctor, their therapist, and their partner. Than any of those people, the most important relationship that had an impact on their mental health was their manager. And so I think it's really important that the 85% of people that haven't got this formal training, that we get it. Like we have to do better as leaders. Like we are really responsible for the mental health of the people that work at our organizations, right? And you may not want to think of it like that, but they're with you day in and day out. And you have a lot of responsibility to make sure you're leading them well. And most of us don't know how to do that, right? And so we may end up being the toxic boss that we never intended on becoming, right? The toxic boss that we ran away from at our old organization, like we may have become that person. And I know this because I lived this. I used to work at an organization. I'm going to tell you a little story. Okay. So I used to work in my corporate manufacturing days. I worked in a paper mill, right? So forestry, paper industry. If you don't know anything about that industry, a paper mill runs 365 days a year, okay? And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So someone has to be there at all times. Like there's always someone on shift, there's always someone working, and there's always things to be managed and make sure they're running smoothly. And so when I came into that organization, it's a really old, antiquated business model. It's an antiquated structure. It's a type of organization where it's like an old boys club and people stayed in their roles for 20, 30, 40 plus years. Like when I came to that organization, I was part of like this first hiring class where they were hiring people straight out of college, recruiting us straight out of college and grad school. I came out of grad school into this role, and they were looking for fresh blood because they recognized within their structure that they were really aging and they needed to replace some of those people as they started to retire or get promoted into, different roles or different departments in the organization. But it was a very antiquated model. And so they recognized that and started bringing new people in like myself, a younger generation, right? But the leadership there was very old school, very hierarchical, very like, this is how we've always done it and we're going to keep doing it this way. And my role there was literally the antithesis of that. Like it was the opposite of that. It was like my job was to figure out how we could create operational and cost savings improvements. And so I would have to go around and ask people like, hey, why do we do this that way? Oh, just because that's the way we've always done it. And I'm like, well, that's a terrible reason to keep doing it that way. And now I have to come up with a plan for how I'm going to convince you to do it a different way, right? But that's besides the point. My point of telling you this is that I remember one year, because the mill ran 365 days a year, we also had like terrible vacation policies. Like I think I had 5 days total. And when the mill runs 24/7, like you're not getting Christmas Eve and Christmas Day off, right? So you would have to use vacation days for that, right? And so I remember one year I was talking to one of my managers and he was like, oh yeah, I think that you're going to be working Christmas Day and Christmas Eve. And I was like, okay, well, that's really interesting because the other thing that they did for this organization was they brought these young people in and they moved them, and they also helped promote us faster by moving us to different locations pretty quickly and tried to train us really quickly and then move us to another location where there was an opening so that we could get promoted and kind of move up this ladder, right? So they moved us, right? Like I lived in the middle of nowhere. If you've ever been to a paper mill town, nothing there. So I was away from my family. I was in the middle of nowhere. And so I had moved out for this job. And so when I had communicated that like I'm working Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, I was actually hoping to maybe try to go home for a couple days and see family. And they were like, well, you're young and you don't have your own family yet. So like you should work. Like you should work because we have families and so we would like to be home with them. And I was just like, okay, that's really interesting. And what that means is like your time doesn't matter. Your life doesn't matter. You're young. So we're just gonna, walk all over you. It doesn't matter. And what matters is the mill. And that was really the culture, right? It really was like everybody operated as if we were creating oxygen. It was really important that we didn't stop running, that we treated everything like it was an emergency. And it was a really just like high stress, high anxiety type of culture. Like everybody else operated that way. And I always refused to. I was like, guys, we're not creating oxygen. Like you don't have to call me at 5 a.m. because a truck is down. Like I'll be there probably by 6:30 because that's literally how my job was, right? So the company knew that they had a problem, right? They knew that they were hiring these younger people, millennials at the time, and the turnover was really bad for our generation. Like people kept leaving. And so they had this like young professionals organization within our department, and I was within that, and they wanted to run like a retention survey, right? I think I may have even come up with the idea. I don't remember like if it was top down driven or if it was brought up by some of us as people within that cohort of like, hey, maybe we need to figure out why these people keep leaving, right? But anyways, I led this retention survey. I'm like a yes girl. Like if there's a project, I'm going to raise my hand. I want to be on it. Because at the time I was also really trying to move up the ladder very quickly. Like I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be on the projects. I wanted to do good work. And I was a workaholic and I did that, right? And so we interviewed all these young hires, people in my cohort. We were trying to figure out like, why were people exiting? Like what were their reasons? Why were people staying? What were their frustrations? And so then I compiled all this data from these surveys, this retention survey, and I was there to present it to the C-suite, the C-level executives, right? And so I did this work. Results were really clear. Okay, people valued their time more than they did money, willing to give up raises for more time off, right? They wanted more flexibility. They wanted to feel like their work really mattered and that they weren't being asked to do things that felt out of alignment with their values. They didn't want to just be like cogs in a machine. They wanted leadership that listened to them and delegated effectively to them. They didn't want to be just like the middleman of like, oh, you just go relay that message to someone. It felt silly, right? So I presented all of this information to the executive team. I had quotes, I had data, I had solutions that they had given. And you know what happened after that day? Like they applauded the findings and the presentation. They acted really, like they cared about what was being said here. And after that day, I gave them really clear, like, here's what you could do to keep people around, like retain these people, right? And you know what they did? Nothing. They did nothing. And they went back to doing things the way that they had always done them, right? That was kind of the culture that they had. Like, we don't really want to change, right? Change is really hard. Or these are the antiquated things that worked for us, right? So they often felt like, well, those young people should just suck it up because that's what I did when I was a leader or when I was in their shoes. And it's like, okay, that may have worked for you, but you also lived in an entirely different generation that wanted and valued different things, and we're different, but they didn't care. So they kept things the same way. They didn't give us more flexibility. They didn't give us more time off trading for dollars. Like people were willing to give up raises and they didn't care, right? So after a while within that organization, I left. I too could not be retained. And I started a consulting company, and I always vowed that I would try to think about my leadership from the perspective of a team member, someone who was working for me, right? I didn't want to do in my company what I felt other people had done to me through default, even maybe not by their own intention, just because that's how they were taught to lead, or because they were swept up in the culture in which they existed in. And I was like, I refuse to do that. So even like we're not creating oxygen has always been one of my like guiding principles for running my organizations. I never wanted my team members to feel like anything was an emergency, that we had to be like operating off this high level of anxiety. And that came from me operating within a space, within an organization where that was the thermostat, that was the culture, the upper management, the C-level suite. They operated as if we were creating oxygen. And I understand that like things, cost money, and they're, if things happen, it's lost revenue, but we don't have to operate like everything is an emergency at all times. Like it really is a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for toxicity within an organization. And so it was just always my vow to my team members that like, I wouldn't treat it as if we were creating oxygen, because in my company, we're not. Maybe you work for a company where you are creating oxygen, and that's entirely different. Like if you're a heart surgeon and you're in the middle of a surgery, that is life or death. But most of us are not in that situation. So as I started this company and the companies before it, I really started to recognize that the old playbook of what worked in corporations and organizations, like it didn't work anymore, especially for our younger generations, which we were raised differently, we grew up differently, we expect different things, we have different values. And so the old playbook didn't work, right? And so it's like we have to first unpack, like, what are the old playbook beliefs? Like, what are the things that the old playbook believes, the old leadership model believes, that we are not carrying on with us? Okay, so I'm going to give you the big three. We'll continue to talk about more, but like, what are these broken beliefs that really don't work in the new model? So number one, this was always like such a pet peeve to me when I worked in corporate, was like, they wanted my ass in a chair. What do I mean by that? I'm like, you were seen as valuable if you were at the office, right? For the longest, right? So if you came in super early, if you left super late, that was seen as valuable because they felt like you were being productive. So that broken belief of like ass in chair equals productivity, or a nicer term like FaceTime equals productivity, right? Like if you're not in the office, you're not working, is what the old playbook says. And if you're in the office, you are working, but that's not true. Like there were many times when I'm just like sitting in the office because I know that my boss hasn't left yet and it looks bad if I leave first. And I just knew when I started a company, I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's like the stupidest thing, because just because my butt is in a chair doesn't mean I'm actually doing anything productive. Versus sometimes I'm at home and I can get something done in 15 minutes and now I'm being productive. I'm actually moving something forward, but you didn't see it. So was it like, if a bear shits in the woods, like, did it really happen? No one was there to see it. Did it really happen? That's how the old model works, right? So if you're not visibly busy, then you're slacking. And the leader who stays the latest is the winner, the most committed. And this is BS, right? We've known this for so many years, many, many years. Like I'm going on almost 15 years, 12 years that I've been out of corporate, and I knew it back then, but especially post 2020, we know that like presence doesn't equal performance, right? Like you can sit at a desk for 10 hours and accomplish nothing, and you can work remotely or work for 5 hours and absolutely move through 3 days of work. Right? So, but the old playbook, like the antiquated model, just really can't let go of this, right? It's control disguised as leadership. And this is what burns people out. It's what makes people frustrated. It's what feels toxic. Because if your value is measured by how long you're visible, then you can really never have a life outside of work, because it's just a competition to see who can sit in their chair the longest. And like, I'm not interested in that, right? So whenever I've built my companies, I've made sure it's very clear. I don't care how long you're in your chair for. I don't care if you go pick up your kid in the middle of the day. I don't care if you go for a workout or take a nap in the middle of the day. What I do care about is results, right? That's pretty clear. Number two, broken belief of the antiquated model is that employees should just be so grateful to have a job. We're doing you a favor by employing you here. So you should be thankful. You should put up with all of our bad management, all of our toxicity, all of our long hours, all of our flexibility, because at the end of the day, we're paying you. And that's also BS, right? Like work is a transaction. Value is exchanged for value, right? So you're not doing them a favor, and they're not doing you a favor. Not doing you a favor by paying you. Like you've provided an exchange, right? So you give your time and your expertise, and they give you money. And hopefully they give you purpose and growth and development. Some do, some don't, right? But this is a trade. This is very simple. In economics, it's a trade. It's not a favor, right? And so when you treat people like they should just be grateful for what they have, like they leave, right? Especially younger generations, because they don't feel valued. Like they're not going to stay somewhere that treats them like they're some disposable part that should just be so thankful that they're employed. Right? Like loyalty, the old model says that loyalty is earned by the employee. And the new playbook is all about loyalty is earned by the employer, right? We flipped it. And this is what younger generations have done because they value their time and they value their value and they know what they bring to the table. And you can't just treat someone like shit because you pay them. Like that isn't going to work, right? Because people aren't willing to live with that long term. All right. And the third broken belief that we're going to talk about today, there's so many more, don't worry, we'll talk about all of that at some point, is this more like authoritarian type of model where just like do what I say type of leadership, right? Like it's the old playbook kind of says like you're the boss and you should know everything. or I do know everything, so just do what I say. Just listen. It's kind of like the parenting model of be seen and not heard. Right? That's kind of how the old playbook works in terms of an authoritarian leadership model. They kind of believe that I'm telling you what to do, you should just do it, instead of contributing as an employee or as a person on the team. Right. And so as the boss, they feel like they should know everything. If they have this model of like authoritarian, do what I say, like I'm the leader and I have all the answers, right? Then as the leader, you're constantly thinking like, okay, so I should know everything. I should have the whole plan. I should never admit that I'm wrong. I should never admit that I don't know something because I have to tell them exactly what to do. And that is painful as the leader because it makes you feel like an imposter when you don't have the answers or when you're not quite sure what to do and you really want to turn it into more of a democracy, but you can't because you're like, I'm supposed to know everything and do everything. But that never works because nobody has all the answers, right? And the old model doesn't allow for uncertainty. So people in those leadership positions end up doing things they shouldn't do, moving things forward that they don't know anything about. It doesn't allow for collaboration, and it really positions the leader as this all-knowing authority and everybody else as followers, right? Like you're the all-knowing force and we just follow you. And as the leader, you end up burning out because you're trying to be perfect. You're trying to do this, put all the weight on your own shoulders. You make terrible decisions because you won't ask people for input. Your team stops thinking for themselves because they've been trained to just wait for you to tell them what to do because that's how you've always done things, right? And that is what the old playbook gave us, but that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work because also people want to be collaborators and people have good ideas and those ideas should be heard, right? So here's the good news, right? Like if that's the old playbook and that playbook doesn't work and 85% of leaders have no training and everything that we've learned is from our previous generations and those things don't really work anyways, then this is good news because it means we have a clean slate. We have a clean slate to write the new playbook, right? And we're not constrained by like, well, this is how I've always done it. It's like, well, no. Like we know that rule doesn't work. It doesn't actually get us the results that we want. So we can't just write that into our new playbook. We don't have to operate off of that belief system. We get to write a new belief system for the new model, for the new playbook, right? So you're not stuck in a system that is going to prioritize control over results, that is going to prioritize butt in seat over flexibility or hierarchy, authoritarian over collaboration, right? Like this is where we get to ask like what actually works as leaders and what gets results and what treats people like humans, right? And we get to build it from there. And if you've been trained in the old model, which maybe you by default have learned from the old model, you're going to have to unlearn some of that. But now you can just start fresh. We're going to start with a blank slate, right? You're going to make mistakes, but you're also free to improve your leadership and become the kind of leader that you wish you had had, like the kind of boss that you wish someone had been for you when you were struggling as a team member, or you get to reject the parts of leadership that really didn't work for you or felt condescending or felt not collaborative or not helpful, right? And that's what this whole podcast is about, right? Like to write a new playbook, right? So let's talk briefly about what some of the things the new playbook is going to model for us, right? So number one is results over presence. Again, opposite of ass in seat. Same thing I do with my team members. I don't care how many hours you're in your chair. I care about results, which starts with us as leaders being really clear about our expectations. And that's usually problem number one, is we're not clear with what we actually want. And so then people just use butt in seat as a metric. Like, oh, you're here, so you must be working or you must be adding value, when that's not actually true, right? And so your job as a leader is not to monitor everybody's activity, it's to drive results, which means you care about outcomes, not that someone logged in or were at their computer from this time to this time. Like, I don't care. Like, did they hit the goal? Did they deliver the work? Did they move the project forward? I don't care that they did it from the couch. They don't care that they did it at 11 p.m. when it worked for them. So results over presence is the new model, right? New playbook. The second principle of the new playbook is clarity over control, which leads directly from our previous playbook point, right? Like the old playbook prioritizes and feeds into micromanagement, but the new playbook requires us to clarify expectations and then get out of the way, right? Like you can't trust results over presence. You can't trust that someone is doing what they need to do and getting the results they need to get if you haven't clarified your standards, or if you haven't clarified your expectations, or if you haven't communicated what the goal or the outcome even is, right? And so that's why people resort or like defer to butt in seats as a metric or as a control mechanism. It's not actually the metric that you need. It's just that you haven't defined the new one, which is clarify your expectations, right? When you do this, you're not managing tasks, you're setting direction for people and outcomes, and you're not hovering over them. You're checking in on appropriate accountability and feedback loops that you've designed, right? You're not doing your work for them, you're coaching them on how they can effectively do it themselves. So it's all about that clarity over controlling them. And the third new rule for the new playbook is all about humanity over authoritarian hierarchy, right? So here's the truth. Like your team members are whole humans with lives outside of their work. And they have kids, and they have health issues, and they have aging parents, and they have mental health struggles, and they have big dreams, and they have side hustles, and they're crocheting, and they're pickleballing. And the old playbook says, like, leave that at the door. We don't want to know about that. When you come to work, you're all work. And I know this because at my corporation, it was all work. Like when you're work, you're work. Like don't tell me who you actually are. And the new playbook is like, I see you as a whole person and not just as a productive widget unit, right? And that doesn't mean that you're going to be your team member's therapist, not at all. And it doesn't mean that you're going to lower your standards, not at all, right? Like we in our level 11 leadership, our sort of bossy kind of leadership model, we speak about this idea of high care, high standards, right? You're going to have high standards of people, but you also can have high care for them. And that's actually how you're going to get the best results out of your team members, right? So we don't need to lower our standards, but it does mean that you are going to lead with empathy. You're going to see them as a whole person. You're going to give flexibility when you can. You're going to treat people how you actually want to be treated, right? And so as we move through this season together, I want you to start thinking about these 3 questions, okay? These are like your gut check-in questions that as a leader, I want you to really think about and give yourself honest answers of where you are now, not where you want to be. Number 1, would I want to work for me? Am I a good boss? Like seriously, if you were on your own team, put yourself in someone's shoes, would you be excited to show up every day? Would you feel supported? Would you feel challenged? Would you feel valued? Or would you be just waiting for a moment to exit, right? Be really honest with yourself. Where are your shortcomings? Would you want to work for yourself? And there have been times when I can say, I was not being a good leader and I probably wouldn't have wanted to work for me. And I needed to really reflect and improve that. And I think that's really important because I also have clients where I ask them, I'm like, would you want to work for you? Because what you're doing right now, I wouldn't want to work for you. Like this is how you're coming off, right? Question number 2, is this how I would want to be led? So in those moments, in the micro decisions that you're making. So before you make a decision, ask yourself, is this how I would want to be led? Before you set a new policy, is this how I would want to be led? Before you have a hard conversation with someone, is this how I would want to be led? If someone did this to you, would you respect it or resent it? Does it feel toxic or supportive, right? This question is going to save you from so much bad leadership along the way, just because it's a moral question, right? Of like, is this how I would want to be led if I was in the opposite position? And then question number 3, before we wind things down, like, does this actually get results or does it just feel like leadership theater, if you will, right? Like sometimes we do things because we think that that's what leaders are supposed to do. So we just do it. We haven't really questioned, like, is this actually valuable? Is it getting results or do I just do it because I thought I had to, right? Like a lot of times when I come into organizations and start working with them, I'm like, why do we have this meeting? They're like, oh, because I thought we were supposed to, or because we've always done it. I'm like, again, terrible reason to keep doing something, right? So we have meetings because that's what we think managers are supposed to do, or we write performance reviews for people because that's the process and we're supposed to do it, or we have specific policies because we're supposed to have this structure. Aren't we supposed to have that? And like, yeah, some things, sure, but they need to make sense, and they need to make sense for your company, not just everybody else's company, right? So you have to be asking yourself, like, is this actually moving us forward, or is this just leadership theater, right? Because the new playbook is about impact, not optics. Like, we don't care how we look, right? We care about the results. Okay, so as we wrap this up, like the old leadership playbook, it's dead. And that's really good news for us. You don't have to lead the way that your boss led. You don't have to parent the way your parents parented you. You don't have to follow a model that burned people out or created toxicity in the workplace and made people not want to be there. You don't have to pretend that you have like every single answer. You get to build something better for yourself and for the people that work for you. Because again, 69% of them said that you and your impact on them has a bigger influence than their doctor, their therapist, and their partner on their mental health. So really questioning, like, is this how I would want to be led? Is this getting us results, or is it just leadership theater, right? Like, would I want to work for me if I was doing this, right? And we don't have to do what we've always done or what other people have done before. So conversation by conversation, episode by episode, we're going to be figuring out what leadership actually looks like in this new model and what this looks like for you within your organization. Because I always say this to my clients, like, there's no right or wrong decision. There's only what's right for you, right? And as a leader, you get to decide, what does that look like, right? So we're going to be figuring this out together in a real human world with real constraints. And we're going to do it in a way that creates a culture and an environment that people actually want to show up to on Monday morning. Like for me, I want to help create workplaces where people actually want to work. So your homework is to answer those three questions, right? Like, would I want to work for me? Is this how I would want to be led? And does this get results, or does it feel like leadership theater? Before you go and do anything, I would love for you to subscribe and write a review if you haven't yet. It means so much to us and the future Sort of Bossy community for you to write a review so that other people can find this show. And the best way that people could find the show is if you would share it with them. So if you know someone who manages or leads other people, I would love for you to share an episode with them so that they can find some of these answers for themselves. And remember, thank you for being sort of bossy. That's exactly what the world needs from you and me. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode.